This is Tiffany Rosier, the host of the Afros and Nice podcast. We use the Anchor podcasting app to create and distribute the show. Creating a podcast on Anchor is effortless. It allows you to record a high-quality podcast and distribute it everywhere, including Google Podcast and Apple Podcast. They distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. No fancy equipment or podcasting experience is necessary, and it's 100% free. As long as you have a story to tell, Anchor is the platform to use. Share your story through audio using the Anchor app for Android, iPhone, or your desktop. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. I'm Tiffany Rosier, and this is the Afros and Nice podcast, the interview series that elevates the stories of Black women and women of color working in food and beverage, hospitality, and food media. This week's shout out goes to the mobile food app Eat Okra. Eat Okra is a smartphone app that will help you discover your next favorite restaurant. Developed by military veteran Anthony Edwards Jr., the app is a curated guide to Black-owned restaurants and food businesses across the country. It is available to download from both the Google Play and Apple stores, so download the app today and find your next favorite meal. I don't know about anyone else, but this week has been the longest year ever. We continue to fight for the preservation of our industry. As always, those of us who work and report on this world have a unique connection, and we have protected and provided for each other like family. This week's conversation was both aspirational and reenergizing. Talking with Rahanna reminded me that what we do is invaluable and worth fighting for. I hope as we watch the ever-changing present, we can find hope in knowing that the future of the culinary industry is in the very talented and capable hands of young people like Chef Martinez. Keep your heads up, fam.
Hi, I'm Rahanna Bisseret-Martinez, and I was a finalist on Top Chef Junior. And I first started cooking with my mom in the kitchen, and that's where I first started having fun with cooking. And then I started going to the farmers markets, and I saw a lot of fruits and vegetables and things like that. And that got me more excited, and so I kind of did more independent learning about it and things like that. And then I think I was 13 when I got on Top Chef Junior, and that was super fun. And I thought I was just gonna cook and that was it. And I didn't think any more other opportunities were gonna happen afterwards. It was just that. And then I got to do some catering for some carpet events and things like that, and that was a lot of fun. And now I'm kind of doing stages, and I basically go into kitchens and I learn from the chefs and the people in there. And I really like doing that. It's a lot of fun. And then, I get to do some conferences and things like that, and it's a lot of fun.
Nice. And that's such a, as an adult, you start to expand that story quite a bit. And then I like us to think this is where we started. This is where I am. This is where I'm going. That was brilliant. So I guess my first question then is, because you didn't expect to do as much as you're doing right now after Top Chef, what did you expect from Top Chef? I mean, I guess because it's television, it could have gone a couple of different ways, but what did you want to get from the Top Chef experience that you are now kind of surprised that you're getting even more from?
Well, I applied for the show thinking I was just going to do challenges, and I thought it was going to be really fun. And it was a lot of fun. I just didn't register that it was on TV and things like that. I knew it was going to be, but I just didn't I I guess I didn't think that far ahead.
That's fine. That's fine. I mean, I think sometimes it gets you in trouble. Like if you're a creative person, if you think too far ahead, you kind of build up too many expectations. And then if something doesn't happen, you're just like, oh, well, maybe. And then you start to like wonder, like, was it me? Like what happened? I didn't know. Maybe I didn't plan. So what's been like, I guess, what's the coolest thing that has come from being on Top Chef for like you personally, like not even necessarily in a professional space? Because of course all of that, like putting you in a conference and like being able to, I love a good stage myself. Being in different kitchens with different teams and things like that is always cool. But like personally for like your own, I guess your own career goals, like what did you have like a goal? Like I want to be a chef that runs a restaurant and this is a great way for me to get there. Or has it just been like, maybe I need to think about this. This is something kind of like something I didn't consider before.
Well, when I was younger, I always knew I wanted to be like a chef and own a restaurant. And then I think after the show, I kind of like started learning a lot more. And then I started like wanting to go do stages and things like that. And so I feel like it all just kind of rolled out and like I planned part of it, but then part of it, like you can't plan certain things, you know? So
Exactly, exactly. And they've been a surprise. Has anything surprised you about like, like what you kind of thought being in a restaurant would be like, and then something that kind of was like, oh, I didn't realize that this would be a thing.
something that I realized a lot of the times, like it's like, oh, a restaurant's very mean and the chefs are like rude and all this stuff. But it's not at all like that. Like everyone's so nice and it's so much like a team effort about like getting the diner their best like experience. And that's something that I didn't really know the entirety about. And then I went to my first stage and I saw like the people eating the food and they're like taking pictures. I was like, wow, yeah, that's so cool.
Oh yeah, I think my first line cook job it was in New York, and so and I hadn't considered working in a restaurant up until that point. I had worked in catering, and I thought that was just fine for me. I like the idea of having like super control over the entire process leading up to, and then just like execution, and that's it. So like that first time around, it was just like, okay, this is interesting. Wow, but it is. Have you? Have you found that it's been easy to kind of come to that point where you can hear a lot of instructions and a lot of direction and you're just like, because some people get into it and they find, like, I thought it was very like meditative, almost like having all that activity going on around you, just really focus, and then other people find it completely overwhelming. So have you like kind of found a middle ground, or have you found it kind of just to be a very peaceful space for yourself?
I think it's kind of the middle because it can be peaceful, and then there's sometimes where I get put at like stations and I make some of the food and things like that, and it's really exciting. And I really like to like plate up the dishes and things like that. So I think it's peaceful, but at the same time, it's a lot of like doing like multitasking. So it's like peaceful multitasking.
Exactly. It has you have you noticed like some of the stuff you've learned staging has like you've applied it to your everyday life, like with schoolwork or just like how you organize your day?
Yeah, for sure. Staging like helped me kind of with my schoolwork because I like start making out lists of everything I need to do and then what time I'm gonna get it done by. And that's kind of like
Nice.
in the kitchen with like the prep list and things like that. And so
Oh yeah.
I think it's helped me like be more organized. And also it's really cool how they like organize in kitchens with the like walk-in refrigerators and how they like organize everything. So it's definitely helped me learn to be more organized.
Have you like started to reorganize your fridge at home based on what you've seen in the
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
I, like, will label something sometimes, like, "Oh, this is blah, 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 and this is gonna go bad, and this was what
Oh
it
yeah.
need."
Exactly. Like you end up having like tape and Sharpies everywhere. You're just like, this was not my life before now. This is really interesting.
Right.
What's been your, I guess, not favorite, but what's been the stage that you like have the biggest memory of, or like that's kind of like resonated with you the longest?
Um, I don't know if it's the one that I had the biggest, like, most, like, memory of it, but one that was, like, super exciting for me, well, all of them are really exciting, but I got to go to Chez Panisse, and that was really exciting because I'd always, like, loved Alice Water and Chez Panisse, and so getting to go to their, like, kitchen and cook there was, like, a dream come true. It was so fun.
I still haven't gotten that one yet, so that's still on my bucket list of stages to do. So yeah, is there one you want to do that you haven't gotten to do yet?
Hmm. I think there's so many restaurants. I don't know if I could name them, but I really like the kitchens that I go to because everyone's so nice and it's very hospitable in there. And yeah, it's just a really nice experience because sometimes I get nervous like to go into a kitchen, but then once I
Oh
get
yeah.
there, it's like just it all goes away because everyone's so like welcoming and then I just start doing my like cooking and chopping and things like that.
Oh yeah, and it's always I've tried to explain that to people as I've been working is that what you see on television for restaurants and chefs is definitely a caricature of like I mean there's plenty of restaurants that have been like that before where they throw things at you or there's yelling and tantrums and things of that nature, but I think modern kitchens and as more women and more people of color have gotten into kitchens and they lead kitchens, I think you do find like a really like generous environment where everyone it just wants everyone to do well and you don't mind teaching what you know and that kind of thing. Is there a skill that you've picked up in any of the kitchens that you didn't have before that you've been like working on?
Um, I don't know if it's a skill that I've picked up, but something that I've definitely been more aware of is like my speed of when I'm cooking. Like
Mhm.
I kind of like learn to be faster and kind of like keeping everything very compact and together and organized. And that's something that like has improved since I started staging. And so that's
Yeah.
that
Oh yeah.
I like.
Do you plan on going to like culinary school or do you because I know I always had it two ways. I had a culinary instructor who told me don't bother with culinary school, like just go get into a kitchen and learn from a chef. And then I have other people who are like go to school, it gives you really good structure, it gives you a chance to like practice in an environment where you can make a lot of mistakes. So have you decided on that yet?
I haven't decided yet. I hear a lot of like, "Oh, definitely do it," and then also like, "Oh, don't do it. You're in kitchen. Keep doing that." And so
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like when I am older and like I'm at the age to go, I feel like I could make the proper decision for myself. But right
Cool.
now, I don't know.
I would say if you do get to that place, investigate some schools that are just not in the United States at all. Like there's some really cool culinary programs that are out of the country that are just really vigorous but beautifully done, and that would offer you a bit more. I guess schools in the United States can be they're global, but not in the most vigorous way, where you kind of touch on a few different cuisines and you get through them really quickly. But the thing about cooking that you already know is like you can get super curious about something and you want to just like flesh it out a little bit and keep like pursuing it until you get all your questions answered. And a lot of the challenge with culinary school is you just don't get the time for that because they're trying to get you through the program and get you on the other side. And then it's like, well, just cook in a few restaurants and you can figure that stuff out for yourself. And you're just like, but doing it in a school environment's kind of like I can pace myself. It's a little safer and I don't have to worry about like trying to have a job while I do this whole thing because I'm a student. So definitely consider some out of the country programs if you can. So is there I guess because I did send you some questions and now I'm trying to remember what they were. Oh, the are there any like really big ideas you want to develop as far as even like restaurant? Like do you have an idea of what you want your restaurant to look like or the kind of food you want to serve?
For big ideas that I want to develop, I kind of want to like continue things that other people have done, like Edna Lewis and Leah Chase and Alice Waters, kind of continue their like legacy because what they do is so amazing. And I kind of just want to carry that on and kind of, promote vegetables and healthy eating and, like helping people. That's something that's, I think, is a big idea that I want to work on. But restaurant wise, I don't know. When I was younger, I was like, this is what it's going to be, and it's going to be like this. And then now I'm like, no, not at all. And so I don't know if I like have a set idea yet, but I know I definitely want to have a restaurant one day.
All right. Cool. Have you done any work on like with any farms and done some like farm to table dinners and stuff like that? Since you have kind of really focused in on like produce and vegetables, and of course Alice is huge on on local farming and using local product. So have you been able to like connect with any restaurants with farms or been able to like jump in and like work on a farm and like do some work with them?
I haven't been able to work on a farm, but when I do like pop-ups and I do like demos and things like that, I'll use like farmers products instead of like from the grocery store. And I did a pop-up with a cupcake place in Berkeley, and there I used a women-owned creamery company. And so I like to like support women farmers and people of color farmers, things like that. And so yeah.
It's funny, it's as you continue to work, you'll find like very specific issues that you want to put your weight behind at this point. And have you, I guess they'll definitely change over the next decade. I can only imagine, like when you're 25, that the world of food will look vastly different. Let's hope it looks really different than it does right now. Is there any specific like food issue that you have been drawn to that you really want to like lend your voice to and like put your skills towards?
I think a food issue that I've been drawn to is definitely, I feel like there's so many people like working to make change in food industry. And so it's really cool to support those people and things like that. And definitely kind of creating space for people of color, chefs and people in the restaurant industry and women. And so I think kind of just supporting people who are making change is something that's really important.
Cool. And now for you, have you seen anything about, I guess, like no kid hungry and that kind of things? I know like right now with all the quarantining and the corona and all the other things, like they've been talking about like closing some schools and that, kids not being able to have meals and things like that. Have you seen any of that kind of stuff kind of like just in your neighborhood with your friends? Like, anyone talking about that just where you live, and what your, kind of what your thoughts are for kids your age and like going forward about like food inequality and like what that could look like when you guys are adults, and like how you would like to, lean into that a little bit.
Yeah, so with it, like in my area, I know my school is like on break. It just got on break today. I got like an email saying, "Oh, you want to have class?" And I was like, "Okay," but I have some online classes, so I still have to do that, which is fun. But I think with like food inequality, I think something that's really important is like understanding like when people are like really want to help, they have to ask the people who need help what they need instead of kind of giving them what they think they need. So I think that's something that's really important. And I think with like my generation, I think with handling food inequality, I think we could kind of take that aspect part of it.
That's a brilliant response. I have to give you. Most people don't understand that about adult people. Don't understand that about giving help. Is that you need to ask the person who needs the help, like how to help them, just not make an assumption like we're just going to do all these things for you and it'll just be just fine. And you're just like, but that's not what I needed. So that's like that definitely carried that wisdom forward as you get older, especially with other food issues that will probably arise in the next decade or so with like climate change and the decline of the bee population and all those other things that kind of threaten our food sources at this point. That is definitely something to carry with you, because I think it's a challenge right now. I think that's a big issue. Like us trying to solve that problem is the fact that we are making assumptions about what people need instead of just asking them and having a conversation. So yes, right on, spot on. Stick.
I actually can't hear you.
There we go. Yes, me hitting the mute button. One of the questions that I had sent you was, what were your thoughts about like the future of food? So in a decade or so, where do you think food will be, and where do you hope food will be?
So I think the future of food is like changing now because like people in the public diners are starting to be more adventurous with eating, and they like to eat fruits and vegetables, and they like to like challenge their palate and try new things. And so I think the future of food is definitely going to be a more diverse palate, and it's going to include more global cuisines and regional foods, because I feel like everyone has this like plain idea like, oh, that's Italian, that's Chinese, that's, you know, so they don't understand like the regional aspects. But I feel like people are kind of understanding that part more. And I think that's something that I'd like to see in the future of food, and I think is already happening.
Absolutely agree. Like not just the overall like, oh, this is Asian food. And it's like there's just so many countries, and even within those countries, there are so many like subcultures and communities that we just haven't even discovered yet. So that's definitely let's all hope. Let's all work towards that future if we can. Is there anything specific that you grew up eating that you would like other people to know about that you just don't see very frequently on like a restaurant menu? Like even something that maybe your grandmother or your aunts or somebody in, in your family that's just kind of part of family tradition that you're just like, why don't we cook this more in restaurants? Why don't more people know about it?
Well, growing up, I'm Black and Mexican, and so a lot of the food that was like showcased in those categories was always like, oh, okay, Mexican foods, tacos, and that's it. And then like the other type of foods, fried chicken, and that's it. But I see now there's a lot more like different types of food because I think people realize like Black food isn't just like African American food. Because I'm African American, I'm Haitian, and so like Haitian food is so good. And I don't see a lot of like Haitian restaurants, at least in California. But I think something that's really cool is like kind of opening that up and like wondering like, what if I like saw more restaurants like that?
It'd be interesting to see like a Haitian Mexican like fusion situation. I think Naisha Arrington does a combo of like African American and Korean
Right.
because of her heritage. And so I would love to see like this, a really interesting hybrid of like the two together. Always find like foods, like most cuisines have some type of common ground somewhere.
For sure.
Like I think every cuisine in the world serves rice. Most cuisines have some type of like donut,
Yeah.
so there's always something that you can find like common ingredients and common dishes amongst them all, and I think those flavor profiles could definitely play together really well. So my very best friend in the world is Mexican. I lived in Arizona for a very long time, and so her family's just south of the Californian border, and so we always end up kind of having these meals together that are a hybrid of like my and her cultures, and we always find like some common ground somewhere. So it's definitely made it more interesting. Is there any cuisine that you've tasted that's been kind of new to you that you're just really excited and curious about and you want to explore a bit more like right now?
Right now, I kind of like everything excites me. I really like going to the farmer's market and like I'll see like produce and like that'll excite me. Like, ooh, what if I used it in this way? But for like a specific cuisine, I don't know. I kind of like all types of food. So
Everything. Yeah. There was a point where I was working for the Nashville Farmers Market and doing a lot of like their food programs and things like that. And I found myself in the same space where people were like, it's the hardest question and it will not get any easier as people ask you like, what's your favorite thing to cook? Do you have a specialty? And I'm like, no, it's like asking a doctor, what's your favorite thing to operate on? And, like, stop. No. But I did find that ingredients excited me more than like any specific cuisine. And so I tended to like pick an ingredient first and then decide like if there was a cuisine that was really appropriate for it and then would go that direction. So I think you're thinking like most of us do, like, nah, just no, I don't have a specific cuisine that I would prefer. I think I end up having curiosities for extended periods of time. So like there was a point where I was obsessed with kimchi of all types. And it was just like, okay, I want to know how it's made, why it's made that way, what are its benefits. So it was like answering a lot of those questions. And so I'll just move on to a different obsession probably in another year. And because the one thing I have, because I've had some kids who have interned for me in different kitchens. And the one thing I always tell them is like, if you find yourself having a curiosity in food, like do yourself a favor and just chase it down. Like take that thing as far as you can, because it's the beauty of working in food that I don't think a lot of other industries get the ability to have. They're not afforded this idea that you can like pursue a curiosity and on the other side of that, produce something really beautiful. And we get this really beautiful privilege of putting food in front of people and then kind of sparking their own curiosity about what they're eating. And so it's a really interesting exchange. And so it's definitely something to like stick to. I don't think I've ever answered that question with an actual straight answer. So most times it's just like, right now, tomatoes are really interesting. So let's go with that. Let's just stick with that. Let's stick with an ingredient. It's a lot more fun. Is there have you traveled a lot? Like, have you been able to like travel to other countries and actually like experience cuisine on that level? Or is it just one of those things? Because for me, I'm like, I didn't get my passport till very late in life. So I've tried to stamp it as many times as humanly possible at this point. But so yeah, is there any country you've been to where you're just like the cuisine here, I have to come back and explore it some more when I have time?
Well, in California, like we have a lot of different like types of cuisine here, because there's a lot of different type of people here, and so that's something that I really always liked when I was growing up is that I always had like different options if I wanted to like go eat out, and so I think something that's really cool is I've been able to kind of explore different cuisines inside California, and so that's something that's really exciting for me is because I think I can always find like a different cuisine.
That's a really beautiful sentiment. I don't think people value the place they live in as much as like you could. I know like living in I've lived in probably 6 different zip codes at this point, and I've lived in San Francisco. And so it's one of those things where if you don't understand what's around you, I guess you really don't have to travel outside of the country to really explore different cuisines. Especially like Oakland is fantastic for having a variety of like cultures and cuisines being cooked together there. And then if you live in Queens in New York, you can essentially eat from any country in the world without going outside of a few blocks. So that's definitely another principle to think about with your future cooking, even is just like, how can we promote this idea of eating locally, like truly eating locally, and using the places that we're already surrounded by that are part of that conversation for us to explore the rest of the world through that. And so it's because I imagine it's a different filter to live someplace else and move here and then cook for the people who live here, and like what that looks like for each and every person. Like, oh, well, we had to adjust a few things in order to make it, more acceptable and that kind of stuff. So these are always questions I have that I'm constantly curious about and exploring. So, dream mentorships or dream, yes, those people who you kind of go, okay, the day is going to come, if it has not already, where I want to spend as many hours as humanly possible completely getting as much information from them as possible. So do you have like it doesn't have to necessarily be one person. It can be a group if it's not, but Phil, do not be afraid to offend anyone. I think everybody will be out here being celebrated, but there's always someone that we resonate with personally that we always want to like spend some time in their presence. So do you have anybody that you're like, that's the person on the top of my list right now?
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of people that have like been really supportive of me, and like I think I always come to them for advice, and I think those people I think those people are like my dream mentorships, or people that like Brian Terry and like Julia Turshin and Nina Compton and Chef Shirley Chung. Those people really like helped me out, and after Top Chef Junior, like I didn't know what was going to happen, and then like those people really kind of helped me understand more about the food industry and things like that.
Nice, nice. I know I saw some of the pictures you had with, I think it was an event for Bryant Terry's book, and that looks amazing. I am definitely trying to pick my brain on how to like get that book into my hands at this point, because that looks like, especially his position on vegetables, and it's like how it's connected to cook to the community at this point. I think as we get smarter about our food sources and how we eat, people will definitely start to lean on like vegetables and grains and things like that instead of animal proteins, which I am not opposed to. I love pork belly and a good steak, but I feel like if we could balance the scales a little bit, we would do better with how we source food and how we consume food in the future, so we have things to eat later on. So after do you have any other like food folks in your life that are in your age group right now? Are you kind of like the lone wolf in your peer group?
Well, like in restaurants, I haven't like seen any other teens in restaurants before, but there's a whole lot of like teens on cooking shows and things like that. And so I went on Guys Grocery Games, and I met like people that I had never met before from like being on Top Chef Junior. And so I feel like there's a bunch of teens that like to cook, and that's something that's really cool.
Oh, awesome. Do you guys have a group that none of us are aware of at this point that we don't have to be a part of it. You don't have to give out names, but we just want to make sure you guys are like connected because I think the one thing you'll know already is that being able to have a community of people to support you, especially in this line of work, is just essential. And so, of course, as you guys all come up together, it would be kind of cool to know, like, okay, we know the future of food is safe because we've seen this group of people and they are connected. So, is there any type of like Facebook group or any type, in case anyone's listening that is in your age group that is like, I want to connect with other people my age who are working in the industry, they can go look for it for
Right.
themselves, but we want to know it exists.
There's no like particular group, but I'm pretty sure everyone's like on Instagram, things like that. So people sometimes come to me for advice and things like that, and so I'll like answer the DM. And they like one time a girl like was doing a cooking competition, and she was asking me for advice for her dish she was making, and she won the competition. So that was really cool.
Yay!
And so I
It's
always
nothing
like when people
so
come
nice.
like ask me questions, things like that.
Oh, I love it. Have you been able to teach any classes?
I actually have been able to teach classes. I I think the most recent one I did. I can't think of the most recent one I did, but it's always cool to see how different people like interpret the recipes because they'll give the initial recipe and then kind of let the like people kind of change it up if they want to.
Yeah.
And so it's cool to see how like people like experience food, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Totally. Because food is an experience. I think it's directly tied to being a human being. And so it's definitely far from just basic nourishment and calorie intake. It's definitely, if you're doing it right, it should be an experience. So let's see. Ingredients that you are excited about. I know we are we probably have about 6 more weeks until there's like a major shift in the seasons. And so we're going to start to see like strawberries again and blueberries again and some really cool, like our usual stuff. So is there anything you're either cooking with right now that you're like really excited about or that you are like just kind of waiting for spring to show up so you can get your hands on something?
Yeah, I mean, I'm super excited for citrus season. Like, I love working with citrus and like all those different things. So I think that's something that I really am excited about. But I think like all ingredients really excite me, and I feel like it's a lot of fun like going to certain specialty stores and finding new things. So yeah.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Little citrus salt is always my favorite thing in the springtime. It's just throwing in some zest into some salt and letting it live for a minute. It's so good. For like what you're cooking right now, like in the last few weeks, is there something you've been like cooking at home that you really kind of keep coming back to that you really are kind of still trying to flesh out or figure out? I know I try to give myself a cooking project as frequently as possible because I always want a problem to solve. So is there anything you're cooking that you just absolutely love and you just keep doing it? Because I know sometimes you can get into that space, which is totally okay.
I think I always am gonna like fall back on like comfort foods for me that I like to cook. I don't know if I have like a specific one that I'm working on now, but I always find myself like when I want to make lunch really quickly, like doing certain comfort foods of like cooking up different vegetables and roasting them, things like that.
Mm. Cool. And is your mom, of course, your mom is probably still doing quite a bit of cooking at this point. At least we would, I don't know if you've picked up quite a bit of the load at this point, but is there something that she cooks that's always just like the thing that it feels like home to you when she's putting it on the stove?
Well, my mom, she like roasts a lot of different vegetables and things like that. And one of my things I always remember like growing up is there's this like stewed cabbage dish that I think is Haitian. I don't really remember, but it's so good. And when she makes it, it's like gives me so many memories. I'm like, oh my gosh, I really love it.
Those are the foods that like will stick with you for the rest of your life, and you will find yourself trying to insert that feeling into everything you cook. Like every time you cook for somebody, you want them to kind of share in that experience and that taste memory. And just kind of like, I want you to feel at home. I want you to like be in a place where you feel like you're most happy and your most secure self when you eat something. So definitely, definitely like lean into that energy a little bit too as you keep going. Is there a meal that you've had recently that has stuck with you? I mean, I'm sure there's quite a bit of food you've been eating, but is there anything that you've like sat down and had a plate of food and you were just like, it hasn't left me yet? Like the spirit of that meal is still with me.
Like I don't know if it's food wise, but recently I helped with family meal at Gwen, LA, and it was just like
Mhm.
so fun to cook with them. And I think it was kind of the energy and the experience. I don't know if it was the food, but I really like it was so much fun.
I have long hoped eventually that a restaurant would actually create a menu around family meal. It's really one of the coolest experiences in any restaurant is having family meal. I was in a restaurant in Boston not too long ago, and they were in the middle of transitioning from lunch service to dinner service. So their staff was in the middle of family meal, and I was just like, can we get a part of that? I mean, just I'm happy to give you any money that you want for this particular meal, but you find like it's one of those things where it is this kind of like the spirit of sitting down and eating with the people you really work hard with, and of course, most times you're not even having to think about is the food going to be good because you know it will be. It's just exactly you're like okay, I don't have to worry about it. Is there a food trend that you are absolutely tired of looking at though? Like, is there something you're just like, can we not do this anymore?
Um,
Can we stop?
I really like natural food dyes, and so
Oh,
I think I like using like commercial food dyes is something that I don't do a lot, and so I like dyeing pastas and tortillas and things like that with natural food dyes and like cakes and things like that. So I think that's
um,
something that I really like, and so yeah.
yeah, you're like artificial food dyes. That's a no. That's a no. I think there was a time where we were literally shoving anything into a corn tortilla and calling it a taco. I was kind of over that. I can foresee myself really getting tired of this, the impossible and beyond meat thing.
Uh,
Just kind of like at some point you just go, if you've decided to be a vegan or a vegetarian, just eat the vegetables. Like, why does there have to be a meat substitute? That's scary. Don't substitute the meat. That's the whole point is that you don't need the
yeah.
meat. So yeah, I feel like by the end of the summer, I'm just going to be like, can we not do any of this anymore? That's scary. So have you found yourself looking at food with a more critical eye at this point, like really kind of evaluating menus and things that are being served at this point from that point of view? Because I know at some point in the beginning you're just kind of absorbing everything and there's just not you're not really concerned about like picking it apart and looking for holes and issues and problems, but at some point you kind of just go, as you get older and you open a restaurant, you just it's part of the game. It's just kind of critically looking at even your own food and going, okay, what can we be doing? So is there anything you're kind of looking at right now, just like, maybe we need to rethink that?
So right now, like something that's really interesting to me is like critically looking at like the plating and like still like making it look super nice, but then also the practicality of it and things like that. So I think the plating is something that I'm kind of like dissecting right now. And I kind of like looking at the compositions of plates and things like that.
Is there anybody specific, any chef specifically that you like really love what they're doing as far as like how plating is going and like what their presentations look like?
Well, I really like all plating. I don't know if I could pinpoint one particular person. Um, But yeah, I like anything like with height and like colors and things like that. But I also like really appreciate like the dishes that are just kind of like all in one color story, if that makes
Oh,
like
okay. Oh,
they're all
absolutely.
like this like beige ivory-ish color or they're all like this like nice green color. Like that's something that's really cool to
I
like
love.
color theory and things like that.
Nice. I mean, I was an art student before I became a chef, and I still have a slight obsession with fashion. So yeah, I understand that. Like I look at food, the visuals of food, it kind of in the same way I look at design and fashion. It's just kind of like, ooh, yeah, that works. Because I feel like food and fashion and like food and design work together. You'll notice like if you talk to a couple of chefs, they're going, oh yeah, I was a graphic designer for a long time. Just like how and why, or they still paint or they still get into art. So yeah, you'll definitely find those connections for sure. Is there anything outside of food that you've been like getting into that you're definitely planning on exploring that might not have any tie-ins to food, which is fine, or that you find like it informs your work in food as well?
Yeah, so I started a watercolor class this semester and it's been going like it's like a lot of fun and I kind of want to like start doing like food illustrations. I think that could be fun. And I had
Oh,
this
yeah.
idea of doing like a watercolor menu. And so yeah, I've been doing watercolor and I'm not really good at it, but I think it's a lot of fun for me.
There's time. There's time. I was terrible at it. I used to do acrylic painting all the time, and it took me about a year to actually be pretty good at it. And like I don't do it as much now. But to your point about illustrating food, I have a friend who is a brilliant watercolor artist and does with like works with watercolor and inks. And we have been collaborating on a cookbook idea where all of the visuals are watercolor and
That's so
not photograph.
awesome.
So yeah, so that should be a really interesting. That should play out really weird. I mean, it's just one of those things where people are going to look and think they're getting a photograph, and it's going to be just this beautiful visual of a watercolor dish. So I'm kind of looking forward to see how that changes, like even how people present food to each other.
Yeah.
I think with photographs, we do think about the visual on the plate in a different way. And so we were to kind of remove the photography portion and actually present it in a watercolor or as, colored pencil or something like that. How would people feel about how their food is plated after that? Like knowing that, you don't have this visual. So yeah, definitely really great habit to get into is like painting and like finding another way to express yourself creatively will only make your execution in the food space that much clearer. You'll definitely have a clearer vision, and the way you tell your story will definitely be a lot more succinct because you're able to kind of express yourself in another space. So let's see, what was my other question? I had one that popped up in the middle of that. Recipe wise, like, have you been able to like work on like recipe writing? And because it's definitely a skill in and of itself. And so I didn't know if you had like, if people have come to you and you've had an opportunity to like to sit down and actually like write a recipe out and create a recipe for publication or for other people.
Well, like I haven't been able to create a recipe for a book or anything like that, but I do create recipes like when I teach classes and do demos because a lot of times they hand out like recipe cards. And so I have to create recipes for that. And I think one time I did a demo and it was like partnered with this like health based like company. And so I had to like really like focus on the nutrition portion and like make sure it like followed all the guidelines. And the family meal I was talking about earlier, I made like these shrimp and grits and then this like roasted chard and vegetables. Then I used like this chard stems and pickled them for the grits and then like a salad. And I was like kind of working through it and like, how many grits do I need to make for 50 people? And I was like, I usually only like make like 2 cups of grits, but now I have to make like 10 cups of grits. And so it was like interesting to like I have to like scale up recipes or scale them down to see how they like fit.
It is definitely one of the tougher skill sets for recipe writing is like how to scale a recipe because you're not really writing recipes ever for yourself. They're always for like public consumption. And so it's a absolute practice to like continue with, even if you're not like publishing them at all, is like writing them out and like testing them, which is definitely something people skip all the time is the testing part. And I always encourage people, like if you're into recipe writing and recipe creation, it's like always set aside some time to test the recipe, like really vigorously. Because it only makes your recipe that much more like airtight and foolproof. So yeah, if you can lean into that, it's, absolutely, because I know at some point a lot of food publications will come calling and they're gonna be like, can you submit a recipe for us? And can you tell us a story about it as well? And so like having that skill down is going to be absolutely brilliant for you. So, because you already seem like a really great storyteller and you seem like you can express yourself really well through food. So I don't think that'll be the challenge, but definitely, yeah, when you're like, yes, this recipe serves 6 and then someone cooks it and like, nope, actually it serves 12, but okay. So yeah, and I find that a lot with like recipe sites and stuff like that is that no one, like home cooks usually aren't like testing their recipes like that to make sure they're accurate. But we get the joy of doing that for them. So absolutely. So one of my favorite questions this season has been to ask people what is their kind of like their dream meal, and it can be like an end of life exercise if you want it to be, or it can be like right now, like five. If I had a 5 course meal and like any and like absolutely like no limits, like what would that look like? Yeah.
If I were to eat a 5 course meal or make one?
If you were to create one, like if someone was like, we want you to create your dream menu, and it can be, and you can go as detailed or as little detail as you want. Like some people went as far as like, I want it served as courses. And some people were like, I want it all served on the table at one time, and it needs to look like this and be served in this kind of place. So you can go as far as you want. But I gave everyone a limit of 4 to 5 courses or 4 to 5 components to this menu, and that's it.
Okay. Well, something that I really like about hospitality is like kind of catering it to the diner. And so like kind of like changing the menu up depending on like the person eating. So like if they didn't like fish, I wouldn't like this is my fish course. So I don't know, that's kind of hard. Maybe like I like making like ice creams and gelatos. So there's definitely be like an ending course with that. And for the beginning, I like anything crispy. And so there'd definitely be some type of crispy appetizer. And then the next course, I don't know, I had to make some like, oh, I saw this really good thing and it was a crawfish bisque, and that sounds really good. And I want to try and make that pretty soon. But I'm not sure what the full menu would be, but that sounds.
It's funny because like I don't think anyone's given me like the full menu yet, and it's awesome because each answer is so vastly different, and it just tells me a lot about. It's been able to like tell me a lot about the person. Like the first time I asked, someone responded with like the first thing on the menu was like something their mom used to make, and so it was just and it's like I said, it's changed from person to person, but it's always like it gives you an idea of like where someone is and what's the thing that's kind of like bringing them comfort, because you always go back to that, like the fact that you're like, there needs to be something crunchy on the menu. And that's something my grandmother would have said, like she absolutely like prioritized crunch factor over pretty much everything. And then like gelato or ice cream and like having that at the end and having that as a finish. So it just, like I said, it's just one of those questions where I kind of throw it out there because it helps me learn a little bit more about yourself. I had a gelato, I think it was like 2008. To give you any context, 12 years ago, I had a gelato that I still remember so vividly. It was one of the best things I had ever eaten, period, hands down, ever. I was working at a hotel at the time and in guest services, and a friend of mine won a free dinner at the restaurant, and the hotel had just opened. And so we were still like testing menus and things like that. And so it was like their first week of service. And so we were like, yay, we get to have a free meal. And we got through the whole thing. Everything was delicious. And then we were like, well, let's have dessert. And we were like, just bring out whatever you have. It's fine. And so they bring these little dishes. And when you looked at it, it was like, okay, this is definitely gelato. They didn't tell us what it was. And it was like, this is definitely gelato. And so we get into it and I'm just like, what is this fruit? What are we tasting? And I'm like, it was incredible. Like the texture was flawless. So once we were done, the chef comes out. And of course, since we're all working together on the same staff, we were like, hey, like the meal was great. You guys are doing great in the kitchen. And so finally I was like, what was the fruit in the gelato? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, the fruit in the gelato. He was like, there's no fruit in the gelato. I'm like, okay, there's no way there's not fruit in this gelato. And so we're all arguing about it at this point. Like we would know because we didn't see him make it. And so I'm like, so what is it that I'm tasting? What is this like really beautiful, like floral citrus note that's in this gelato? And he's like, well, actually it's olive oil. So, oh my God, I literally pushed my chair back and got up and walked away. I just was like, we're done here. Because I was still in culinary school at that point. I'm like, no, we're finished talking. If I can't eventually make things like this in my career, I don't want to be bothered with my career at all. And he's just laughing at me. I'm like, where did this olive oil come from? Why does it taste like fruit when you put it into a gelato when it's frozen? And the beauty of it was that he didn't have to add any dairy
Oh, wow.
because that fat in the gelato created, or in the olive oil created that richness. And it was an olive oil that his mom used to send to him
Oh,
from Italy,
wow.
that you can't buy, that you naturally can't buy
Oh,
here. So
wow.
that made it great. And I'm like, so I'm never going to be able to replicate this. That's awesome. But yeah, that was one of those food memories for me that like informed the rest of my work in food. Like I wanted to be able to have that moment with people with food I created, and like where they were just like, I don't know what just happened here, but I will never forget it. And so to this day, like anytime I have gelato or ice cream, I'm just always like, when will I have that
Oh,
again? I need to see if I can get my hands, yeah, olive oil. So if you get a chance, like experiment like big time with like other types of fat besides dairy. I'm sure you'll come up with something brilliant. So last but not least, while we have a few more moments, is what are you up to right now? What are things that we can like as a community like support you in, and like events that are coming up for you that we can all come out and people if they want to meet you and like shake your hand. Well, let's not shake hands yet, guys. Not till the corona is gone, where they can just bump an elbow or say hello or just like cheer you on. So anything that you want us to know about, just let it go.
so I am going to be moderating a panel at the ICP. It was this month, but it got pushed back to October. And I do a lot of demos and private dinners, and so I like if any of those popped up, it would be on my Instagram, which is Rahanna. It's my full name, Rahanna Bisseret-Martinez, and yeah,
Awesome, awesome. And most of your pop-ups and like in your private dinners happen in California.
yeah, most of them happen in California, but sometimes I go outside of the state to do demos and things like that.
Okay, perfect, perfect. And you're only on Instagram for right now, not TikTok or something other that we none of us know
I'm
about yet.
on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, but
Okay,
that's it.
thank you. I mean, I haven't figured out a number of other apps yet, and I don't have anything against them. I just don't know how they
Right.
work, and so I appreciate you keeping it simple for the rest of us. And yeah, are you planning on any type of like video? Do you have any like video or anything out there just yet? I know like some folks have jumped into like doing, of course, video production and putting some cooking videos out. So I didn't know if you had any of those types of visuals that people can jump in on like YouTube or something like that.
I don't have any videos like coming out now. There are some like interviews that I have online and things like that. But yeah, I definitely want to work on like a video or some type of show and things like that in the future.
All right, I have ideas. Okay, and so for anyone who is like your age and who is looking, like you gave some really great advice to the other girl and she won her competition. For someone who is, trying to get into like a professional level, like cooking scenario at your age, like what advice could you give them at this point?
I think at this point, for someone who wants to, like my age, who wants to start like cooking at a professional level, I would give them just to do as much like reading and studying about it, and then just ask, because I feel like there's no harm in asking if you can come in and stage at a restaurant. They're either going to say yes or no. So I think just ask and see if you can get that opportunity. And so that's why I'm always super thankful for the people who do give me opportunities, because I know they don't have to let like a 16-year-old come in the kitchen and help them cook.
What would you want to say to like just adults who've been cooking a long time in the industry about the next generation of professional cooks? Like what would you want them to, what environment would you like us to create for you guys coming up?
I'm not sure. It's kind of a hard question. Um, I feel like currently I haven't experienced any bad experiences, so I wouldn't know yet. But I'm sure I don't. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, and it doesn't have to necessarily even be from a bad thing. It's just maybe you see something that's missing from the industry overall that like as you get older in the industry that you'd want to see, like, okay, someone put some energy towards like solving a problem that's there that like I said, it doesn't have to necessarily even be a bad thing. It just could be like, oh, we should have more of this in the industry. So like by the time you get to that point, you're like, yep, this is the kind of this is the kind of industry I want to be a part of. And you can just think about it. It's fine. I just put the question into the atmosphere. It's all good. It's just something, and it's, and not having an answer right now is totally reasonable. I don't think any of us really have like a complete answer. I just know that like generations of Black and brown women coming into the industry, like each generation solves a new problem. And like right now I'm in a position where I can like really enforce some changes so that someone like yourself in 10 years doesn't have to waste energy on like creating something or like fixing something, and you can just keep moving and look at like new problems and like new questions. So if ever there is a time, definitely just let us know. I mean, those of us who are leading right now can absolutely spend some energy on that, so you guys don't have to. So yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. Please thank your mom for me.
I will.
And yeah, just like I said, the wisdom you have acquired currently about food, definitely just lean into that stuff. And when you start to see questions that need to be asked of a broader audience, just don't hesitate to ask them. I think the time has come for harder conversations, so that again we can have an industry that includes everyone and that tells all stories really beautifully and respectfully. And so yeah, I'm absolutely excited to see, like, if you're an indication of what food will look like in the next decade, I think we can all get a better night's sleep. So thank you. And I definitely will look forward. I will definitely try to get out to an event if you're on this side of the country at some point, or if I'm in California again. So yeah. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. You have a good day. All right. Bye-bye. Bye. That's all for this episode. Thank you for listening. And remember, if you want to support what we do, then share, subscribe, leave a review, and rate this podcast wherever you may listen. As always, Afros and Knives is a listener-supported podcast. To become a patron of the show, please visit our website to find our Patreon information. That's all for now, but I will see you in the next episode of the Afros and Knives podcast.